Chapter 3. Andy's parents, Moria and Philip, stormed into the precinct. Relief never reached their faces. Their presence filled the room before their voices did. Sharp, scolding words cutting through the air, directed at their son rather than the nightmare that had hunted him. Instead of comfort, they gave him blame. Instead of safety, they gave him shame for stepping outside when killers prowled the streets. I rose to meet them, placing myself between Andy and their fury. The law was on my side. As a minor and an eyewitness to a brutal murder, he was under protective custody. The precinct was not a prison, but a safeguard, his only shield against the predator still out there. I explained this calmly, though my pulse was far from steady. My words did not soothe them. Philip laughed, strident, bitter, hollow, and pointed at the badges in the room. One by one, to serve and protect. To him, it was a joke, a promise broken long ago. His anger was not just for me, but for an institution that had failed to keep the city safe. Moria reached for Andy, but he pulled away. His quivering legs carried him to me instead, his small hand clutching my arm as though it were the last thing keeping him upright. His eyes, wide and wet, pleaded in silence. Keep your promise. Don't let them take me. Don't let him find me. Their fury deepened. They accused us of poisoning Andy's mind, of filling him with fear. Philip's voice grew harsher, demanding his release, warning me to stay away. But the law was clear. Andy was a witness. He would remain in protective custody until he could be questioned further. This was not defiance, it was duty, and I made sure they understood. Their son was safer here than anywhere else. Anger turned to silence. Reluctance settled in its place. At last, Moria and Philip agreed to remain at the precinct. They would not leave him, but they would not take him either. The station, however unwillingly, became their sanctuary too. Andy was brought to a secure room, where the shadows of the city couldn't reach him. He refused to let go of me, his grip tight, unwilling to loosen even as exhaustion pressed down on his quivering body. I stayed with him, tending to his needs, listening when he could muster the courage to speak. Every bit he gave me, every detail of what he'd seen, added to the puzzle that seemed to grow darker with every piece. From the lobby, the murmur of voices carried faintly through the halls. Moria and Philip, unbridled by guilt, offered their apologies to the other officers for their earlier outburst. Their shame was heavy, but I didn't dwell on it. My focus was here, with Andy, the boy who clung to me not just for protection, but for survival. Once Andy had calmed, I began again, careful this time, hoping his story would emerge clearer, more grounded. I asked him to start at the beginning. Where had he first seen the old woman? His voice wavered, but he spoke. She had been searching through a garbage bin near the river, just under the bridge. Andy had only glanced at her, then looked away, continuing down the street toward home, his house a kilometer away at the far end. But something drew his eyes back. In the darkest part of the bridge, a tall figure stood, something around 6.5 feet tall. The neon glow of the city barely traced the edges of its form, highlighting it just enough to prove it was there. Before the old woman even realized she wasn't alone, the man moved, running with terrifying speed, leaping onto her, pinning her down. She screamed, but the sound died in an instant. Andy said it was as if the scream had been swallowed when their eyes met, as though the man had stolen her voice. The figure rose, hauling the old woman up by the throat with inhuman ease. Then, like an animal, he leapt from the abatement to the pier column, carrying her with him. She never fought back. She hung limp, silent, already lost. Andy had not screamed for help. He couldn't. Terror held him still as he watched. The man pressed one hand to the woman's chest, the other still locked on her throat. And in a single swift motion, a blur Andy could hardly comprehend, the man tore through her clothing and skin, ripping it away as though it were nothing more than paper. Andy's trembling returned. His small shoulders shook. His voice faltered. I reached for his hand, steadying it with mine, coaxing him forward, and he continued. The rest of the story unfolded as I had feared. The creature-like figure, the skin stripped away, the old woman discarded. But when Andy described the moment the killer turned toward him, his words faltered. His memory ended with flight, running, heart-pounding, desperate to escape before those burning eyes found him again. Something was missing, a gap I could not ignore. Andy had seen the horror unfold, but not the end. He had not seen where the killer placed the woman's skin. He had not seen how the grotesque imprint of a human body had been pressed into the wall. That unanswered question hung heavy in the air, a void between Andy's words and the evidence carved into the bridge. Somewhere in that missing moment lay the clue I needed. Outside the safe room, Moria and Philip stood stiffly in the hallway, their faces pale and unreadable. I told them what had happened, what Andy had described. They listened in silence, their eyes flickering with disbelief. To them, it sounded impossible, unreal, something no sane mind would accept. I couldn't blame them. I agreed. And yet, out of 7 victims, this was the only account that gave us something we could hold on to. When they asked when they could take Andy home, I told them the truth. Tonight, he was safest here. In the morning they would be free to leave. Until then, the station would be their refuge. I opened the door, letting them inside, letting them stay by his side. Andy gave me a look that lingered, worry written in every line of his face. I smiled faintly and pressed a fist against my chest, a wordless promise to stay strong. Andy's lips shook, but he raised a small hand and mirrored the gesture, his own faint smile breaking through the fear. It was enough. I left them together and returned to my office. The sofa groaned under me as I sank into it, my eyes fixed on the board across the room, a mess of photographs, notes, and threads crisscrossing into a map of folly. Each line was meant to point toward an answer, but all I saw was a growing confusion, a puzzle that refused to resolve. The sigh that left me was heavier than I expected. My throat was dry, my chest tight. For the first time, I admitted to myself what I had been trying to push away. This wasn't just some killer. This wasn't just another case. Andy was right. This truly was something else. Something inhuman. A monster.